Does Bioshock 2 hold up over a decade after its release? That's a good question that I seek to answer today in my review. Now, Bioshock 2 is a 2010 first-person shooter with some sci-fi and horror elements, and, hence the title, it's the sequel to Bioshock 1, and I must say that I enjoyed this game. And I'm going to start my review by saying that I played this on the hard difficulty. I usually play games on normal for my videos, but I felt like going for hard this time around. That out of the way, I'm going to start my review on the story, something the Bioshock series is known for being good at, and while I won't give any spoilers, I will say that this game has a very well-written and emotional tale with some turns that I didn't expect, and the story is shaped by your choices, with several different endings depending on what you do, and I personally got the best of all the endings, and I watched all the other end cutscenes on YouTube, although I will say that I preferred the good ending of Bioshock 1, but Bioshock 2 had an enjoyable happy conclusion as well. Going a bit further into the story, the most important parts of this game's adventure are shown in the main quest, but there are also tons of interesting audio logs from NPCs which help add a lot of extra filling to the story. In fact, I even seem to remember seeing an interview somewhere where one of the Bioshock devs said that they wanted to make super intriguing audio logs so that players would actually stop and listen to them, and I must say that whoever wrote all these logs did a great job, as I listened to every single one that I found, versus some games where I just glossed over them without a care really, so props to Bioshock 2 in that regard. On a similar note to the story, I will say that you can probably skip Bioshock 1 and just play 2 if you want to, as it's not super vital to understanding the second game, although I would recommend playing Bioshock 1 first. Alright, moving on to discuss the combat. I'd say that this title did a good job in that department, being a first-person shooter where you have powers, called plasmids, which are usable in your left hand, and a weapon in your right hand, ranging from things like a minigun to a shotgun to a frickin' spear gun, cause why not? Although I mostly stuck with the minigun in a Serious Sam fashion, or I used the rivet gun, a semi-auto rifle which uses rivets as its primary ammo. Now I'm gonna be 100% honest, I wasn't really sure what a rivet is, and apparently they're more or less big nails with a blunt tip. Anyways, each gun has 3 ammo types, with one being standard ammo, and the other 2 could be things like armor-piercing rounds, which deal extra damage against armored targets, or trap ammo, like a proximity mine, which blows up when an enemy walks near it. In addition to having guns, you also had some equipment, being the remote hacking device, allowing you to shoot a machine and hack it from a distance, versus walking up to it and hacking it by hand. And you also had the research camera, which allowed you to learn the weaknesses of various foes by recording your fights with them. And the more that you recorded your battles, the more goodies you unlocked, like being able to dish out more damage against opponents, or maybe even unlocking new perks, aka tonics, which I'll get more into shortly. But getting more into the topic of fighting, I want to dive a bit more into your powers, aka plasmids, which I mentioned earlier. Plasmids are gene-altering powers unlocked with Atomic Gatherer Garden stations scattered around the game, although you do unlock a couple for free, and they can be things like a fire attack, or an electric bolt, which can be used to stun or fry enemies if they happen to be standing in water, and you use Eve, the blue bar in the top left of the screen, to power your plasmids, and they are really useful in combat, especially against tough enemies and in tight situations. And speaking of tough enemies, Bioshock 2 holds a pretty decent variety of foes, more than its predecessor if memory serves me right. Now, most enemies are something called splicers, humans driven mad by overuse of plasmids and tonics, and they have a variety of forms, like thuggish splicers, who are limited to melee attacks, leadhead splicers, which are splicers with guns, brute splicers, who are giant juggernauts with large health bars that do a crap ton of damage via melee attacks, but they can also throw large items at you. There were also spider splicers, which can climb ceilings, and they throw what I can best describe as knives at you. And the most annoying of the bunch, Houdini splicers, who can teleport around and attack you with plasmids. There were also Big Daddies and Big Sisters. I always feel so weird saying Big Daddy, but in this game, you actually play as a Big Daddy. But one that's broken free of a form of mind control if I properly understood the story. Now, Big Daddies won't actually attack you, and they'll only act in self-defense, but you do have to kill them to rescue Little Sisters, required for the good ending, who the Big Daddies protect. There are a couple different varieties of these guys, with varying threat levels, and once you get the proper weaponry and upgrades, they're really not too big of a hassle to deal with, but the Big Sisters on the other hand, ooh, they are much more threatening, being much faster and more lethal and tougher than a daddy, but thankfully they'll only spawn in if you remove all Little Sisters from a level. But why should you go the hassle of fighting a Big Daddy and Big Sisters over the Little Sisters? Well, in most cases, it is optional and you don't have to do it, but again, saving Little Sisters is required for the good ending. But you can also have them harvest Adam, which you need to unlock the previously discussed plasmids, but you can also upgrade plasmids with Adam, or by the aforementioned tonics, upgrades which do things like lowering prices at vending machines, reducing the damage you receive from melee attacks, or one of my favorites, which was one where you can stand in water to restore your health and Eve, which normally requires health items to do and it won't regenerate on its own. But back to the Little Sisters. In Bioshock 1, you could simply relieve them of their mental bondage and set them free to receive a small amount of Adam, or harvest more Adam off of the sisters, which would sadly unalive them. And this is still present in Bioshock 2, but you can also use the sisters to harvest Adam from deceased corpses, which could be risky, as it would lure in a horde of splicers into that area during the process, but the Adam payouts were almost always worth the fight, although this did add a little bit of length to the game. And I believe that almost wraps up the combat of this title, although I will add that this game does have a limited weapon upgrade system, in which you can find weapon upgrade stations scattered around the game, which will allow you to choose one improvement for your tool of combat, but these stations can only be used once, so make your choices wisely. On a similar topic to combat, I would like to discuss something I sort of disliked about the game, and that is the health system. Now, I'm mostly okay with what Bioshock 2 offers here, a standard health pack system instead of regenerating health, and you can also find things like food lying around to restore some HP. Okay, nothing wrong with that, but my problem is that while looting items or corpses, you'll often find multiple items. Let's say $10, 7 rivets, and a cream-filled cake, but you already have full health. Well, in this game, you have to pick up all items in a container at once. You can't just take some items, you have to take everything, and I would sometimes want to just take the money and the ammo, and leave the health item for later in case I needed it, and I would have to make a choice to eat a food item when at full health and take the other things, or just leave everything and hope that I didn't forget about it. This could have been very easily fixed by just leaving the food items behind and taking everything else when you have full health, because you can leave behind ammo and med packs if you're at your max limit, but you're forced to consume provisions you don't need or just leave everything behind. Moving on to other things, something I noticed pretty quick was that the horror vibe of Bioshock 1 wasn't as strong as in the second game, and I don't seem to be 100% alone here, as I saw a comment on a Bioshock 2 video that says the first Bioshock felt like a horror movie, while the second Bioshock felt like a tragedy, and I think I agree with this honestly. Graphically, the game looks pretty good, and it ran well. Now, I will say that I played the first game on PC, and I had some subtitle issues with that game, but I had no performance issues at all playing Bioshock 2 on Xbox Xbox 360, unless you want to count that it sometimes took upwards of half a minute to save my progress. The soundtrack to this game was alright, the voice actors were great, and the sound effects were pretty good. And this game even has an online multiplayer mode, although the servers are empty in 2025, which sucks because a lot of the achievements are locked to the MP, meaning this game is physically impossible to collect all achievements on only the single player. And yeah, Bioshock 2, a pretty enjoyable game with a lot of content for an FPS, and I give this title a 9.2 out of 10 by my grade scale, well worth the $7 I paid for a UCIB copy. So yeah, I would say that this title holds up just fine. As far as similar games that I would suggest, I'd say Singularity, another sci-fi FPS with powers, or one of the other Bioshock games if you haven't played them, and I have reviewed the other 2 games in the series. Links will be in the end cards for anyone who's interested. As far as our Bible verses of the day, I read from Matthew chapter 9, verses 12 through 13 NIV. On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And that's all for me for today, folks. Thanks for watching, and I hope y'all enjoyed my video. For any newcomers here, I mostly play, review, and discuss video games, so feel free to check out some of my other vids if that sounds interesting. Like always, none of my content is made by AI, and I don't consent to my voice and likeness being modified, altered, or copied by AI in any way, form, or shape. Thanks again for watching. Always remember that Jesus loves you all. Peace. Going a bit further into the story, the most important parts of Bioshock 2's adventure are in